Well, as some South Africans prepare to return to work, questions have been raised about how businesses will ensure the safety of workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Civil society has been hosting a panel discussion on the protection of workers in formal as well as informal economies. Joining me to talk about this is Pat Horn, who's the international coordinator of StreetNet International. Pat, good evening to you and thank you so much for joining us. Speak to us about that the panel discussion that was held. What came out of that?
Hi, which panel discussion are you talking about? The one with civil society?
Yes.
Well, basically, we've been talking about the situation of workers in the informal economy, and they come from different sectors. It includes street traders, waste pickers, subsistence fisher people, community health workers, home-based workers and domestic workers. So when the lockdown first started, most of their work came to a standstill and they were not able to earn anything because these are also people who are not covered by social protection such as unemployment insurance fund, and so they're not even able to apply. Even informal workers who work with some UIF coverage have not been able to apply because of non-compliance by their employers. So basically, as we're looking forward to level 4, we are looking at the possibility of some people being able to go back to work, but of course under different conditions, with social distancing at work, with wash stations, with sanitizing. And so there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done, and particularly to encourage people to comply with those provisions and realize that it's not back to what it was before, but a new situation as people go back to work.
There's so many questions that have been raised about how, companies are going back to work. Many of them are going to be looking to make as much money as possible, once they reopen. And so will the protection of their workers really be top of their priority when, they want to make the most of this time of being able to be open, not knowing whether we'll be going down to level 3 or going back to level 5? Whose responsibility really is it to make sure that workers are protected, and who oversees this whole process?
Well, firstly, the workers in the formal economy who have employers in this regard are in a different situation from workers in the informal economy who, many of them are own account workers, which means self-employed. So they don't have an employer to satisfy. It's their own ability to raise an income that is a problem. And of course, for many people going back to work, they are likely to find that the market is not the same as it was when they last worked. So some of them will go back to work, but will still not earn very much. But workers in the informal economy don't have any choice, to be honest. And there are many sectors that are not even allowed to go back to work. So we already had food vendors who were allowed to start working from the 7th of April, and that depended on getting permits from different municipalities. The implementation of that by municipalities was extremely uneven, to put it politely, but many people did get back. Now there are going to be people allowed to sell who are selling other goods, but there are other people who still can't go back to work. So we basically had to fight very hard to get a basic income grant for people that are not registered with UIF, because the UIF people in principle have a grant they can apply for, and it's a case of that coming through. And then also the people that don't have other social grants. So a very small special grant has been agreed of 350 Rand a month. It's extremely small. But even the application for that 350 Rand for a series of people who are not already on the databases of SASSA, that's a challenge for us at the moment. We're besieged by calls at the moment from people who stopped working, haven't been earning anything, want to apply, and the pressure on the applications is making that extremely difficult.
I just want to go back to that panel discussion that was had on the informal and formal sector. The solutions that came out of that, where do they go? How do they help, some of the workers who desperately need, as you're saying, aren't able to claim from some of the relief measures that have been put in place?
Well, as far as the formal workers are concerned, the Minister of Labour has been giving us assurances that the Unemployment Insurance Fund has addressed their flaws and their weaknesses, and we would like to give him the benefit of the doubt and hope that that is the case. Because for people that are on the books of the Unemployment Insurance Fund, and those who've been paying in whose employers haven't been paying in, which means they're still on the books, we are hoping in the next week or so that those workers will start seeing their payments. And of course, workers who have that access to Unemployment Insurance Fund, the amounts they're likely to get will be higher than the basic grant for those people who only have this 350 Rand a month. I can't imagine personally being able to manage on 350 Rand a month, and I'm sure most of us can't. But for people who have no option, that's the only difference between themselves and nothing at all. Mm. So I think that we've got many different situations. We've got situations of people that are going to be in factories. The going back to the factories is happening in smaller numbers, which also again means not everybody is able to go back. Factories are supposed to be being made ready for workers to come back in full numbers. So we're not really sure what is the time frame that it will take for factories to get ready for 100% of their workforce. For people in the informal economy, apart from the fact that they are going to find markets having reduced, especially in public spaces, it's also likely that workers who lose their jobs in the formal economy will join those in the informal economy, thus increasing the number of traders for the same size of market or smaller. So there's still going to be massive hardship, actually, even for those workers who do go back to work. But most workers do wish to go back to work because it is better to earn something than to have to depend on this 350 Rand a month, which is what some people have to do because the kind of work they do is not included among level 4 categories.
I suppose that leads me to my final question for you this evening then. I mean, with a lot of the workers who are desperate for some sort of income, especially during the times that we're going through now, what sort of recourse or what sort of options would they have when you get to work? You're a factory worker or you're in the restaurant industry or the retail industry, and, your boss is just not adhering to the lockdown regulations. You can see that, some of the things that are happening within your workplace are not right, but they may be too afraid to speak up because they don't want to lose that income that, we've spoken about. So what sort of options or recourse would they have?
I think in the current climate, that kind of non-compliance is being quite strictly dealt with. We found the same thing, the Department of Employment and Labour is strongly discouraging non-compliance, and I think people are able to report. In the case of informal workers, we've been having some high-level cooperation with COGTA, who have been responsible for municipalities' implementation and so on, and they have not been very tolerant about non-compliance. Probably one of the advantages, if I can call it that, of this COVID time has been that in the informal economy and the vulnerable sectors, we are being listened to more than we used to be before. We hope it's going to last when we come out of COGTA, when we're in post-corona economic recovery. So definitely I think the law is on our side and the government departments are on our side where it comes to complying with provisions that have been regulated and have been laid down. And the regulations have been made very, very clear, even those that we think, go overboard. But there's a strong emphasis on compliance, so I think we do have the authorities on our side for the moment where it comes to that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. That's Pat Horn, who's the International Coordinator at StreetNet International.